They called me a ghost. A whisper. The one who brought a multi-million-dollar company to its knees by taking a single sick day. But they don't know the whole story. They don't know about the ignored emails, the closed-door meetings where my voice was silenced, or the quiet desperation that builds up in a man when he realizes he's just a cog in a machine that doesn't care if it grinds him to dust. This isn't a story about a hero. It's a story about being pushed to the very edge, and discovering that the only way to get back up is to burn everything down. It all started when I got the job at Tech Solutions. For the first 2 years it was a dream. I'm not a people person. I'll admit that. I find more comfort in lines of code and the clean, predictable logic of a well-built system than I do in small talk by the coffee machine. At Tech, they let me do what I did best. I was a systems architect. That's a fancy title, but what it really meant was that I was the digital janitor, the plumber, and the construction foreman all in one. I didn't just maintain their systems. I had built most of their core infrastructure from scratch. It was my baby. I knew its every strength, every weakness, every little quirk. When something went wrong, I didn't need a manual, I could feel it, like a parent knows the cry of their own child. I worked long hours, not because I was told to, but because I loved it. I took pride in creating a seamless, powerful network that was the backbone of the entire company. The work was my reward. The quiet hum of the servers was my applause. For 2 years I was left alone, and the company flourished. They saw record profits and expansion, all running on the silent, stable foundation I had laid. I was invisible, and I was happy. Then Mark arrived. He was hired as the new director of technology, my new boss. On the surface, Mark was everything a modern executive was supposed to be. He had a firm handshake, a smile that could sell sand in a desert, and a vocabulary full of buzzwords like synergy, optimization, and leveraging assets. He looked good in a suit, and was brilliant at convincing the higher-ups that he was a visionary. But to those of us under him, he was a black hole of competence. He didn't understand the technology. Not really. He knew how to talk about it in a PowerPoint presentation, but he couldn't tell a server rack from a coat rack, and that made him deeply, deeply insecure. An insecure boss is a dangerous boss. His reign of terror started small. He'd call meetings to ideate on new paradigms, which was just an hour of him talking while the rest of us, the people who actually did the work, sat there in silence. Then he started taking credit. I'd spend a week untangling a complex data migration issue, working through the night to ensure a smooth transition. The next day, in a company-wide email, he'd announce his successful leadership on the project. My name would be nowhere in sight. At first I let it go. I didn't care about the credit. I cared about the work. But his meddling grew more invasive. He'd walk up behind me while I was deep in concentration, staring at my screen. "What's all this then?" he'd ask, pointing at a complex script. I'd try to explain, but his eyes would glaze over. "Right. Well, just make sure you're optimizing the workflow," he'd say and walk away, leaving me feeling like a child being supervised. The public humiliation came next. In a team meeting, he held up a printout of a system schematic I had drawn. There was a faint coffee stain on the corner. "Look at this," he said to the whole room. "This is the kind of sloppiness that costs us money. We're a multi-million-dollar company, not a child's lemonade stand. We need professionalism." My face burned. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. The coffee stain was his. He had spilled it on my desk the day before while telling me about his golf game. I opened my mouth to say something, but he just talked over me, launching into a lecture about attention to detail. I saw the pity in my colleagues' eyes. They all knew what he was, but they were too scared to speak up. Fear is a powerful silencer. The stress started to eat at me. The job I loved became a place I dreaded. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake at night, my mind racing, replaying his condescending remarks, his baseless criticisms. He was creating problems that didn't exist, just so he could be seen solving them. He'd demand I change a perfectly functional process for a new, inefficient one, simply because the idea was his. When it inevitably caused slowdowns, he'd blame the legacy infrastructure I had built, my baby. He was calling my baby ugly, right to my face. I knew I couldn't go on like this. My work was suffering. My health was suffering. I had to do something. I had to trust the system. I had to go to HR. That was my first mistake. I scheduled a meeting with Brenda from Human Resources. She had that professional, sterile kindness that HR people are trained to have. Her office was decorated with inspirational posters about teamwork and integrity. It felt like a parody. I sat down, my heart pounding. I had prepared everything. I had a folder with printouts of emails where Mark had taken credit for my work. I had a timeline of his contradictory instructions and the problems they had caused. I had notes on the public comments he'd made. I laid it all out, my voice shaking slightly as I explained how his management style was not just toxic, but was actively harming the company's technological stability. Brenda listened with a practiced, patient nod. She steepled her fingers and said all the right things. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take these matters very seriously. This is a safe space." She assured me she would launch a discreet investigation, and that my report would be kept completely confidential. I left her office feeling a sliver of hope. I had done the right thing. The company had procedures for this. They would protect me. A week went by. Nothing. Then the only thing that changed was Mark. He got worse. He started micromanaging me to an impossible degree. He demanded hourly updates on my tasks. He'd CC the entire executive team on emails questioning my methods. It was subtle, but I knew. He knew I had gone to HR. The confidential report had gone straight back to him. I went back to Brenda. I was more forceful this time. "It's getting worse," I said. "He's retaliating." This is exactly what I was afraid of. Brenda's smile was a little tighter this time. "Mark has a very hands-on management style," she explained, as if I were the one who didn't understand. "He's a high performer, and he expects the same from his team. Perhaps there's a communication issue we could work on. We could schedule a mediated session with the three of us." A mediated session? With my tormentor? With the company's full knowledge and blessing? The thought made me feel sick. "No," I said firmly. "That won't solve the problem. The problem is his behavior." She sighed, the mask of friendliness slipping to reveal a deep-seated weariness. "Look," she said, lowering her voice. "Mark is very valuable to the C-suite. He's well-liked upstairs. My advice to you is to find a way to work with him. Try to see things from his perspective. Don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat." The boat was already full of holes and I was the only one bailing water, while the captain was busy drilling more. I walked out of her office that day, and the sliver of hope I had was gone, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was completely and utterly on my own. The final straw came a month later. We were preparing for a major system-wide update. It was a delicate operation that I had planned for weeks. It required a specific sequence of actions to be performed in a precise order. On the night of the deployment, Mark decided he needed to personally oversee the process to ensure its success. He stood behind me, breathing down my neck, questioning every command I typed. "Are you sure that's right? Did you double-check the parameters?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with false concern. Then, in a moment of supreme arrogance, he reached over my shoulder and said, I think this step can be skipped to save time." Before I could stop him, his finger hit the enter key on a command he had typed. The screen flashed red. Error messages began to cascade. Alarms, both digital and audible, started blaring in the server room. A critical configuration file had been deleted, not modified, deleted. A core service went down, and it triggered a domino effect, taking down a dozen other interconnected services with it. The company's entire customer-facing portal went offline. Panic erupted. Mark's face went white, and then he did the most predictable, cowardly thing he could do. He started shouting. "What did you do?" he yelled, pointing at me. "You crashed the whole system. I told you to be careful." The next 8 hours were a living nightmare. I worked frantically, my fingers flying across the keyboard, trying to rebuild the file from memory and backups. Mark, meanwhile, was on the phone with the CEO, loudly explaining how my incompetence and failure to follow protocol had caused a catastrophic failure. He was painting me as the villain, and I was too busy cleaning up his mess to even defend myself. By dawn, I had done it. I had restored the system. Everything was back online. I was physically and emotionally exhausted, running on nothing but caffeine and pure adrenaline. I stumbled out of the office into the morning sun, feeling hollowed out. And that's when it happened. The shift, the quiet, simmering anger I had been suppressing for months finally boiled over. But it didn't come out as a hot rage. It came out as a cold, clear, and terrifying calm. I finally understood. They didn't value me. They didn't value my dedication, my expertise, or my years of loyal service. They valued the result. They saw me as a utility, a function, a tool that kept the lights on. Brenda's words echoed in my head. Mark is very valuable. Why? Because he looked good to the people upstairs. I was the engine, but he was the shiny hood ornament, and they cared more about the ornament than the engine. If I was just a tool, they had no idea how sharp I was. I went home and I slept for 12 hours. When I woke up, the plan was already there in my mind, fully formed. It wasn't a plan of destruction. It was a plan of absence. It wasn't about hacking or sabotage. It was far simpler, and far more elegant. You see, in building their entire digital world, I had created something incredibly complex. To make it run smoothly, I had built hundreds of tiny custom scripts, little automated processes that would run at specific times to clean up data, re-index databases, reallocate server resources, and patch micro vulnerabilities. They were like the secret maintenance routines that keep a city running, the street sweepers that come in the dead of night, the engineers who check the water pressure while everyone is asleep. I never told anyone about them, not out of malice, but because no one ever asked. They were my personal shortcuts, my private solutions to keep my baby running perfectly. Mark had once told me that writing documentation is a waste of billable hours, so I never did. All the knowledge, all the keys to the kingdom, all the little daily rituals that kept the multi-million-dollar beast fed and happy, they existed in only one place inside my head. My plan was this: I was going to do nothing. I was simply going to take one day off. I chose my day carefully. It was a Thursday. The end of the financial quarter was the next day, Friday. The company was due to have a massive all-hands video conference with investors to announce their quarterly earnings that were spectacular, thanks to the flawless performance of their systems. The pressure on the network would be at its absolute peak. That Thursday morning, I woke up, and for the first time in a year, I didn't feel dread. I felt a strange sense of peace. I composed a simple short email to Mark and Brenda. Subject: sick day. Good morning. Feeling very unwell today, and will not be coming in. I will be completely offline to rest. Regards. I hit send. Then I did the most important thing. I turned my phone off. Completely off. Not on silent. Off. I unplugged my modem. I made myself a ghost. The first few hours were the hardest. The silence in my apartment was deafening. Every car that drove by I thought was someone from the office coming to check on me. I had this overwhelming urge to turn my phone on, to see the panic I knew must be unfolding. But I resisted. I made coffee. I read a book. I went for a long walk in a park on the other side of town. As I walked, I pictured it. I knew how it would start. Around 10 a.m., one of my scripts that balanced the load on the web servers was scheduled to run. It wouldn't. The imbalance would be tiny at first, unnoticeable. But as the day went on, and website traffic increased, one server would start to get overloaded. Response times would slow down by milliseconds. Around noon, another script that archived old log files was supposed to run. It wouldn't. The server that stored logs would slowly start to fill up its disk space. A critical alert would be triggered, but the alert system was designed to email only one person, me. By 2 p.m. the real fun would begin. A data syncing process between the main transaction database and the reporting database, which the executives used to generate their financial reports, was set to run. It was a complex script I had written that accounted for all sorts of data anomalies. It wouldn't run. The data in the reporting database would start to become stale. When they tried to run their pre-investor call reports, the numbers would be off. Not by a lot, but enough to cause confusion and concern. I could picture Mark at first blustering and confident. It's a minor glitch. The tech team is on it. He'd get one of the junior tech guys to look at it. They'd look at the main systems, which would all report as healthy. They wouldn't know where to even begin looking for the problem, because the problem was the absence of a solution they didn't know existed. By 4 p.m., I imagined the panic was setting in. The website would be noticeably sluggish. The financial reports would still be wrong. They'd be rebooting servers, a clumsy brute force approach that would only make things worse by interrupting other processes. Mark would be sweating, his cheap charisma failing him. He'd be screaming at my team, who would be looking back at him with blank, terrified faces, and they would be calling me over and over and over. My name, once a whisper in the company, would now be the only name on anyone's lips. The invisible man was suddenly the only one they wanted to see. I got home that evening and stayed true to my promise. I watched a movie. I ordered a pizza. I went to bed, and for the first time in a very long time I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I allowed myself to rejoin the world. I took a deep breath and turned on my phone. It was like a dam breaking. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications. 172 missed calls. From Mark, from Brenda, from the CTO, from the CEO himself. 94 text messages. Over 300 emails. I scrolled through them. A detached observer watching a train wreck in slow motion. The messages started around 9:30 a.m. the previous day. From Mark, need you to look at a server issue. Call me. An hour later, this is getting urgent. Where are you? By noon your phone is off. Turn it on now. This is not acceptable. The text from Brenda started around 2 p.m. I hope you're feeling better. We have a critical situation here, and could really use your expertise if you're able. By the evening, the tone had shifted from anger to sheer unadulterated panic. From the CEO, please, whatever the issue is, we need you. Call me on my personal cell, 24/7. We will make it worth your while. The last message, sent at 3 a.m., was from Mark. It just said, please. I took a shower, put on my work clothes and drove to the office. The moment I walked through the door, a hush fell over the floor. People stared at me with a mixture of awe and fear. The place looked like a war zone. Whiteboards were covered in frantic scribbles. Empty coffee cups and pizza boxes littered every surface. The air was thick with the smell of stale fear and desperation. I hadn't even made it to my desk before the CEO's assistant ran up to me. He needs to see you, now. I walked into the main conference room. The entire executive board was there. The CEO, the CTO, and at the end of the table, looking small and broken, were Mark and Brenda. The CEO, a man who had probably never said more than 10 words to me in 2 years, looked at me as if I were a messiah. Thank God you're here, he said, his voice strained. What happened? We've had a total system meltdown. We had to postpone the investor call. The stock is already taking a hit in pre-market trading. We're losing millions by the hour. What went wrong? I looked around the room, meeting each of their gazes. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then I gave a small, tired shrug. I was sick, I said simply. I had a fever. What happened here? The CTO started rambling about cascading failures and data corruption. He made no sense. He was just repeating what the frantic junior techs had told him. I listened patiently. When he was done, I looked at the CEO. The system I built is intricate, I began, choosing my words carefully. It's like a high-performance engine. It needs constant, tiny adjustments to run at its best. I've been performing those little maintenance routines every day for years. They're not in any manual. No one ever asked me to document them. I then turned my gaze directly to Mark. His eyes widened. He knew what was coming. In fact, I continued, my voice calm and even. Mark specifically told me on several occasions that writing documentation was a waste of billable hours, and that my time was better spent on active development. So I followed his direction. I focused on the work. The temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. The CEO's head slowly swiveled to face Mark. The look on his face was murderous. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just stared at me, his face a mask of betrayal and disbelief. I wasn't finished. I'm the only one who knows how to perform those maintenance tasks, I said quietly. Yesterday I was sick, so they didn't get done. The system didn't crash because something broke. It crashed because the one person who knew how to keep it running wasn't here. Silence. Complete and total silence. I had laid the bomb, lit the fuse, and walked away. Now, I was just showing them the crater it had left. I hadn't hacked anything. I hadn't broken any rules. I had simply complied with my manager's instructions, and then I had gotten sick. It was completely beautifully and legally deniable. The fallout was swift. Mark was fired before I even left the room. They didn't even let him go back to his desk. Security escorted him out. Brenda was put on administrative leave, which we all knew was just a slow-motion firing. Then the CEO turned to me. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, hungry plea. What will it take? He asked. What will it take for you to fix this, and to make sure this never ever happens again? Name your price. Anything. For a second, I thought about walking away right then and there. But I saw my opportunity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about taking back my power. All right, I said. Here are my terms. I demanded and got the Director of Technology title. Mark's old job. I demanded a salary that was triple my old one. I demanded a team of my own choosing, and a written clause in my contract that stated my department would have complete autonomy, with no oversight from non-technical managers. And my final condition was this: I would spend the next 6 months and only 6 months creating the most comprehensive detailed documentation the world has ever seen. I would map out every single script, every process, every line of code. I would build a system so robust, with so many fail-safes, that a team of trained monkeys could run it. The company would pay me my new exorbitant salary for every single hour of that work. And after those 6 months were up, my contract would automatically terminate. I was getting paid a fortune to build my own replacement and ensure my own exit. They agreed to everything without a moment's hesitation. They were that desperate. So for the next 6 months I worked. But it was different now. People didn't ignore me. They respected me. They listened to me. I finally got the resources and the support I had needed all along. I taught my new team everything I knew. I built a system that was even better, stronger, and more resilient than my original. On my last day, I walked into the CEO's office and handed him a hard drive. "It's all there," I said. "Everything. You don't need me anymore." He looked at me with a strange sadness. "We were fools," he said. "I hope you know that. We had a diamond, and we treated it like a piece of glass." I just nodded, turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't do it to be a villain. I did it because they left me no other choice. They thought I was just a part of the machine. But they forgot one crucial thing. I was the man who built the machine, and I was the only one who knew how to turn it off. They ignored my words, so I forced them to listen to my silence. And in that silence, I found my voice again. Thank you for listening to my story. It's crazy how being ignored can push someone to their absolute limit. Have you ever felt invisible at your job, or had a boss who just wouldn't listen? Let me know your own stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories just like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for being here.